Okay. Well, I've been having problems with the internet. I just lost what I was doing. It blanked out. Anyway, okay, so let's begin at the beginning with a little review. God is the creative power of the universe. God is the intelligence that causes the forces to work together in a way to bring about what God wants. So we see we see that a spirit is an invisible power. And we see systems, we see principles when we look at God. When we look at the things that God has created, we see principles. We read the Bible. We don't read the Bible for a history lesson. We read the Bible to see principles that God has set forth for us to become godly. So we're looking for principles, and we see how when we see God, we see Him acting in a certain way, and that's how we learn to become in harmony with God, and that is God's purpose with mankind, to bring about a group of people in harmony with Him that will manifest Him to His creation. Manifest Him is that we would be at the effects of God that the rest of creation can see God through. When Jesus was about to be sacrificed, when He was coming on His most terrible hour, He prayed to God not to have His will done, but God's will. And to this priority to God, in seeing the love and having that love become a part of you, that's how you become godly. And if you want to live forever, be godly. If you want to die like a maggot, act like one, and just live to consume. So anyway, we see how God has brought together the entire universe, and that the Spirit of God is working through all the particles that He has created, having effects on the rest of the universe. Now, well, let's bring it down to one little piece. I like the magnet because that's something everybody can play with and experiment and see. You take a magnet under the paper, you sprinkle the iron filings on it, and boom, order comes out of disorder. You got a handful of filings. There's absolutely no order to any of the filings. You drop them on this paper above the magnet, and you will see them all line up. I love that. You're seeing order out of disorder. You're seeing creation. You're seeing God at work. Now, I've talked about all this before, but I don't mind being a little redundant and going over things because I know personally, I don't know, I got to see things over and over and over from just tiny little different perspective in order to clarify them in my mind. So we see these iron filings that God is going through and making order. And as God travels through these iron filings, they become magnetized. And so they have effect on the iron filings next to them. And each one of these little iron filings becomes godly. It becomes a magnet itself. So we see this principle. We see this principle in the magnet. And then we try to apply it. Now let's remember when we talked about Adam, how God breathed into Adam the spirit of life. And then Adam became a living creature that had life. This life is the power of God traveling through this thing that God put together and called man and gave it a life. So Adam became a living creature. This creature was like a unit, a single thing. But what was this creature made out of? Well, he was made out of the elements of the earth. But as we look at this creature and try to understand what God is doing, we see that every one of these skin cells is a living cell. It has life in it. It can have death in it. That cell can die. In fact, they do. They have a very short lifespan. I don't remember just what it is. A couple of weeks for skin cells, maybe a month. I don't know. But anyway, they're dying frequently and being replaced. But the system, all these living life forms working together make one living creature. So we see that there is a harmony of life that brings the unity into the man, the one living creature. Man became a living creature. It says it living soul in most Bibles. Soul means creature. It's the same word. Soul and creature is the same original Hebrew word. So, when these cells work together, that is what makes man a living creature. It's a system. So you have a system functioning in harmony with all of its elements, and it becomes a living creature. You know, there's a, I don't know, it's some kind of a saying that the sum of the whole, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. Like you take each part, you know, they're just, all they are is tiny little cells, you know, have, I don't know, there's little things. But when you put all these cells and organs and all these life forms, all these things that have a life of their own, when you put them together in harmony, they become something greater. They become the animal man. So we're looking for the principles, the systems. We see how God is the power that travels through the elements, and He gives purpose. He gives order out of disorder. He makes order. He creates order, like all the magnets, all the iron filings that are lining up, and that He makes them magnetized. They become godly. We can become godly. God tells us that He is creating a group of people to manifest Him, just like the iron filings, becoming magnetized. We are God-like creatures that God is making godly, those who choose it. The vast majority of everybody I've ever seen in my life have absolutely no desire to be anything more than a maggot. All they want to do is consume. It used to be a common saying, he who dies with the most toys wins. What an idiotic and futile, purposeless life. And yet, in America here, where I see people every day, that is their function. They want to acquire things for no purpose at all. I mean, it's such an ignorant, idiotic life. And I hate to see people wasting their God-given time on such nonsense. So anyway, to become godly. To become godly is to have the power of God traveling through you, making you more godly, just as the magnetism going through the iron filing causes it to become more magnetic. And we see that all the when we have cells in our body that become selfish and quit working for the good of the whole, you know, that's disease. You know, that is something that we don't want in our body. That's a disease that kind of retards the development of our body, the growth of our body. So now the purpose of man. I'm jumping around. I'm sorry. The purpose of man is to become godly. Otherwise, he chooses to have no purpose, and he still serves a purpose, just like all the animals do. You know, they become good fertilizer, and they bring about things, um, which causes an end effect outside themselves. And you can be certain that the end effect is going to be good. That God knows what he's doing, and that God has created man, and man will bring about, whether he wants to or not, God's end, what God has, desires him to do. Uh, you know, just like, for instance, God talks about the king of Babylon. How the king of Babylon was his servant. Not that he knew God, but the king of Babylon was bringing about events that God wanted to have done in order to, for the greater good, for the overall benefit, to bring about the end effect of man becoming godly and manifesting God in his creation. This is the purpose of man. So we're thinking of the body and working, all the cells working in harmony. We're told that, talking about the ecclesia, the called out ones, those who are those who choose to have the godliness traveling through them, those who look around and they see godliness, and we see how that is creative and good. And we look at manliness, the humanity and what it does, and all the evil that is brought about by human nature, and we say, no, that's bad. Make a choice between good and bad, and choose good. God brings life, and we see the life. We see the life. Oh, well, you know, we see all kinds of life. We see mosquitoes and bees and things that may irritate us and sting us and all that. But the thing is, look at the good that they're doing, and you will see that the overall goodness of God. And even even pain brings about development, bringing about godliness, directing us. We need to see God in his creation and allow him to direct us. God directs us in many ways. God directs us throughout all of his creation. We see God in the stars and in the order of the universe, and in the, you know, the forces that we see in the wind and the heat from the sun. We see God in all these things. All these things are bringing about more and more creation, and that brings about the tension of how wonderful God's creation is and how complex. And as we look at it, there's order and purpose in everything. And when we look at man and his natural desires or actions, how ungodly they are and how destructive they are. So we have these two poles. We have good and God, and we have evil and man. But God in his goodness and in his love has given man the ability to leave the evil and choose the good and become godly and leave his evil animal nature. So what we're interested in is the development of the Spirit of God in us. And in order to develop the Spirit of God in us, we need to look for God, and we need to see God. We need to be what's the word I'm looking for? Perceptive of the teaching of God. I mean, when a bee stings you, it's teaching you something. When the nasty man-made food that you eat gets you sick, Use your brain. use use what God gave you to make you godly, which is your mind and your ability to see. How many people refuse to look into the idea of nutrition because it might cause them to become more than a robotic animal robot? That they might become an Elohim, one of the creators, one who has the ability to initiate instead of just being a mindless, helpless victim. So, we want to learn to see God and choose the good and reject the evil. We do this by looking for God in His creation. God gives us a wonderful tool in the Bible, where He gives us all these examples, all these different ways of looking at things. You know how I said I had to be redundant to do things over and over and over and look at things just a little different in order to get them formed in your mind? That's what the Bible is. You know, how many people have said, why didn't God just give me a list of things to do so I'd know? You know, because then you would be no more than a robot, would you? You know, that's not what God wants. God wants Elohim, manifestations of God, little gods. Okay? Now, then you're an initiator, and you can take the unknown and be creative with it. That's what the mind does. You know, a robot, it is cause and effect. You know, you program your robot to do something, and you say, okay, if this, you give it a bunch of if-thens. You know, if you see a car coming down the conveyor and it's a certain color, you do this to it. If it has a certain bumper, you do this to it. Cause and effect. No thought. It's programming. That's what animals do. They're programmed with if-then situations, and it's designed in from the beginning. Doesn't that show you how complex God is? And I know I've said before how idiotic this idea of natural selection is. How can man be so stupid with his arrogance and not see the complexity and the fantastic wonder and complexity in the most minutest pieces of life, like your DNA? Darwin thought that the proof of natural selection came from a bunch of finches over in the Galapagos Islands. On each island they had a little different environment, and these finches all developed different physical characteristics. And he called that natural selection. But he said natural selection comes by accident, without any purpose, without any mind. As if he had a mind to think, you know, I don't know. He chose not to think. He chose not to use his mind. He chose to be so arrogant that he thought that if it wasn't from him, there was no creation. Okay, I'm sorry. I, I, I see these cause and effect things that cause me to go down. See how the devil made me do it, huh? Okay. All right, let's try to get back on track. Okay, the finches, now that they have discovered how to look at the DNA and see a lot of the cause and effect in the DNA, they've found out that all of these finches' characteristics were in all of those finches right from the beginning. They see it in all of them, the ability to change into these different shapes. Now that was a shocking discovery for the science of my time, you know, that I lived through. I was alive with just the beginning of the idea of DNA and how they thought, oh wow, this is all programming, and it, you know, it's set, and you got this DNA, boom, you don't have any choice. But the thing is, this DNA is set up from the beginning, and it is set to fit whatever variables are necessary. And it is that shows the intelligence behind it. That there is no natural accidents that happen to cause the DNA. So anyway, the deeper we look into things, the more we see that God is. Oh, God is, God is, God is. I want to, okay, before, oh, I've rambled on so long. I did want to hit on this one thing here. It's in Hebrews 11, let's see, Hebrews 11, let's see, verse 5. No, that's not the one I want. Hebrews 11. No, 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 no. That's not the one I want. Oh, no. Okay, well, I'm gonna do that in a different talk. Uh, so, what we are getting at here is, for the people that I love, I want them to use their God-given ability to think, to look, to see God. What is God doing? And I know that I've used the example of my garden. I love my garden. I think my garden has made me so close to God. I see God in the garden. And I see the complexity. And mankind looks at nature as the enemy. And mankind is the enemy of God. You know, he takes all of God's wonderful complex creation and tries to destroy it and bring it down into little tiny particles that he has control over. And so he destroys everything. Man is the destroyer. Everything you look at. That's why you don't eat the man-made food. You quit eating it. Don't eat anything that comes in a box, a can, a bottle. Don't eat anything like that. Eat God-given food and you will live and be healthy. So, when man touches stuff, he creates death. Man is the traducer. Man is the death bringer. Man is the devil that casts the arrows through you that brings death in you. So avoid anything man-made and go with everything God made. Use that as a general principle for life. Well, I'm going to have to look up that verse that I wanted to talk about, that I've used this entire talk trying to lead up to it, and I see I wrote down the wrong verse. So I'm going to stop this talk right here, and hopefully real soon, while it's still in my mind, I'm going to do another talk, and I'm going to try to start it right away with the verse that I was looking for. And the verse that I was looking for, it says that God is, and that God is the rewarder of them that diligently seek Him. The idea of diligence is, without effort, you're dead. You're dead. Without effort, you can't be any more than the maggot. Without effort, start doing steps, taking steps, making an effort to be godly. Because that's the purpose of man, is to be godly. And so we won't be godly without effort on our part. And that's going to be the subject of my next talk. Okay, goodbye.